Abolition. Why are we talking about that? Ain't slavery over? And doesn't all of this talk about abolition as it relates to ending mass incarceration and carceral systems really just make Black people less safe and more vulnerable at the end of the day? And even if we get rid of it, we have to have something in place to keep us safe. What are some viable alternatives to our current criminal justice system? I'm so glad you asked because we're talking about it after the break.
Brokers, welcome to another episode of Brokers, where we talk about the unbelievable ish this country has done to keep us broke. Now here are your hosts, Amber and Erika.
Oh my goodness, I see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
Abolition. Why are we talking about that? Ain't slavery over? And doesn't all of this talk about abolition as it relates to ending mass incarceration and carceral systems really just make Black people less safe and more vulnerable at the end of the day? And even if we get rid of it, we have to have something in place to keep us safe. What are some viable alternatives to our current criminal justice system? I'm so glad you asked because we're talking about it after the break. Hey y'all, this is Amber.
And I'm Erika.
And today on Brokers, y'all, we are revisiting mass incarceration, but we are talking about it specifically through the lens of abolition and what it looks like to reimagine our criminal injustice system into one where Black life is valued and where safety is actually achieved and where we are able to deal with the underlying issues that often fuel crime in our community. So this is definitely an overdue conversation.
It is, Amber, and I'm excited that we have a guest, and we actually have a guest who's going to talk about some of those things you mentioned, but also the plight of someone who is literally fighting for their lives. But before we get to that part, Amber, I just wanted to say that my feelings have been a little bit hurt out here in the world of YouTube and podcasting and all of that. So I just wanted to come and have a real frank conversation real fast with the brokers about what's been going on.
What had happened?
Well, first of all, let me give a shout out to my mama because she got me this wrap. And so I'm wearing it because my mama bought me this wrap.
It's cute. I actually was going to tell you that later. It's cute. I like it.
For anybody who is in the Dallas area and knows Sam Moon, my mom went to Sam Moon and bought me this wrap. But anyway.
Your mama did not go to Sam Moon and buy you an African print wrap.
She sure did.
I love it.
But again, the contradictions. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about is, you know, I got stuck in the comments on one of our videos, Amber. And I just feel like you and I are literally out here living through our contradictions, living through our growth, whether that's in our politics, our growth in terms of wanting to get freedom. We're doing that all in public, right? And I just feel like people like to take advantage of that. We sometimes are very vulnerable on this show. And sometimes we talk about things that, again, we're still working through. And sometimes folks just think that's fodder. And I'm like, this is not a joke for us. And our journey, and I'll say my journey then, not yours, Amber, because I don't want to speak for you, but my journey and the transformation that my life has taken on, like these are very real things. I literally quit my job because I couldn't stomach some of the things that were happening, right? And so for people to tell me that I'm not taking this seriously, some of y'all got me fucked up is really what I'm gonna have to say about it. And y'all gonna have to excuse my language, but that's kind of what it is this morning.
Yes.
And I don't like it. And that's what I gotta say. So what are y'all doing? Okay, because at least we trying, and I know trying is not an answer, but we literally are out here trying. Every day I want to be somebody different than I was the day before. Every day I want a different world for my children, and I really need y'all to. I'm sorry, go ahead. What was you gonna say?
No, I just think it's what we're doing is also an anomaly because people are so used to people who put themselves in some type of public position, not acknowledging those contradictions or not wrestling with the tension of how you live in this world. You partake in systems that you know are harmful to you and harmful to others while also advocating against them and recognizing and realizing that we have to do things a different way. And so it's almost like people treat us like we're the problem. But we ain't the problem because at least we are owning it and wrestling with it and talking about it. It's your faves that are trying to be out here pretending like, doing a Cadillac commercial is congruent with leading a movement for liberation. Like, that's the people y'all need to be in their comments talking to them because listen, and make your money. This ain't even about now, but I'm just saying, it's like the fact that we are really telling the truth and recognizing that there is a level of entanglement we have in this system that affects our ability to effectively advocate against it. And what does that look like to wrestle with that? And how do you use whatever power or privilege you do have in light of your own entanglement? I think that's a conversation that a lot more people who are trying to do liberation work need to have, and they need to have it honestly. So when folks do have it honestly, y'all don't look at them sideways like they're the problem.
Well, thank you. And again, I know we got stuff that we need to fix, and we're here trying to work through that stuff. But y'all stay out the comments. What Monique say? What she say about the playground? I don't even know, but y'all know what she said.
I don't know. I thought you was going to say, I love us for real. I was about to say, I don't know if that's the one you want to end with, but no. You do love us for real. That's why you keep it real though. No, but that's all I know Monique was saying.
Y'all need to now, and the other thing before I let this go is this is not a moment of anti-critique. That's not what I'm saying here, because there is room, definitely, as we are critiquing ourselves, there is room for critique. But I just feel like people are being disingenuous, and they're just, quite frankly, being mean. And critique don't have to be mean. So, Amber, if you don't mind, I'm sorry I took that time, but can we bring our guest on?
Yes. No, that was the word. That was the word we needed.
Okay, I'm gonna bring our guest on. So, y'all, today we have with us Michelle Smith, the co-director of. Now, Michelle, do y'all call it Missourians or Missourians? What's the way I'm supposed to say?
Missourians.
Missouri. Okay, I didn't know if I needed to put all the, I'm from Texas, so. Okay, the co-director of Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. Michelle is a criminal punishment system impacted advocate, abolitionist, and activist who experienced incarceration during the COVID-19 pandemic, which made her more intimately aware of the dire reality faced by our imprisoned populations, as well as the egregious actions and apathetic behavior by the vast majority of institution staff and administrators. Her existence within the intersections of being Black, a woman, disabled, systems impacted, and experiencing generational poverty are the foundations of her ideological framework, which is rooted in advocating for those suffering and struggling within a society created, built, and carried out to oppress, marginalize, and dehumanize targeted vulnerable communities. She is dedicated to using her experiences, knowledge, determination, and voice in the struggle for equity, justice, and recognition of humanity. And I feel like I need to say amen at the end of that. And Michelle's advocacy efforts extend to all facets of mass incarceration, including wrongful convictions, higher education for systems impacted people, humane and adequate healthcare, legislative reforms, and advocacy organization proposed to advocate for the wrongfully committed, as well as for humane and rehabilitative treatment while community members are housed in carceral institutions. She also serves on the board of directors for several grassroots organizations and is a leader advisor in several national organizations, coalitions, and cohorts. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Erika and Amber. I appreciate the opportunity to join you guys today.
Yes, so we are excited to have you. And just a little bit of background. Y'all know that Brokish is on Black Power Media, so we have connections with the Remix Morning Show. So I was watching the Remix Morning Show and Michelle was being interviewed, and I was like, we've got to have her on the show. And also, she'll talk more about it, but there's absolutely a sense of urgency around one of the latest plights that she and others in her organization are fighting for. So, Michelle, if you could just, I know I read your bio, but if you could just tell us in your own words a few things about yourself, and then we'll jump into it.
Sure. So I am born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. I am someone who, grew up in a very targeted community where it was poverty, where we were disenfranchised, where we were basically forgotten about, right, neglected. And those experiences actually helped me to survive incarceration, interestingly enough.
Wow.
And so I've, been using my voice, the little voice that I have in this movement, my experiences, in my history, as well as, I've studied a lot over the years. And I've really been using that trying to get our people to understand the systemic biases and oppression that still exists today, right? People think we're past that. We're not past anything. It's just regurgitated. So really trying to use that to, reach out to my community members as well as deal with those systems directly. And so I kind of serve in that buffer zone between my people and, the power structure as well.
That sounds not awesome in terms of you having to be in that situation, but you using the experience that you have to put yourself in the situation to then advocate for other people and also for yourself. But I know that there is and I don't want to call it a story, but I guess we all have a story, but Kevin Johnson. So Michelle, please assume that us and our listeners know nothing about Kevin. And if you could start and give us some background into who he is and his story and all the way up to where we are today.
Sure. Well, I start when I talk about Kevin, talk about Black children. And actually, when I was talking on the Remix show that day, I went back and looked at the chat, and someone in the chat said, why are you talking about, the abuse of Black children? And because everything starts there, right? Everything, all of our issues, all of our, this trauma that we have, it starts when we get here. And so I have to start Kevin's case when I recount it, talking about the abuse, neglect, the violence that Black children are exposed to, and what that means, when they become an adult. And in Kevin's case, he did not get that chance. He was 19 years old when he committed a horrible act that landed him on death row. And that act was actually because of the death of his 12-year-old brother. So his brother is not here today. He would have turned 30 this year, and he is not here because the system did not find his life valuable enough to show urgency when it could have. So I always start talking about, the babies. Our people often say, these things, kids, once you get grown, you're supposed to do better and whatever. And I repeat the quote from Frederick Douglass: "It's better to raise stronger children than repair broken men." And I don't know how we've gotten away from that, right? But we have. But going back to Kevin specifically, so Kevin was 19 years old in 2005. He killed a policeman. He has, shown much remorse for his actions over the years. He has taken it upon himself to heal mentally and to get into spaces around people, even incarcerated, where he can, have that community in order to do so. But Kevin killed a policeman at 19 years old, and he did that because he didn't have the tools to process what was going on in his life. Our children are exposed again to violence, to abuse, and those things psychologically damage them. So when his brother died earlier that day, Kevin did not know how to process it. He basically snapped, is what happened. His brother was 12 again, and he had a seizure. And so when they called the police, which, that's what we do, right? Called the police, and the police arrived. They did not treat him like an emergency was going on. The police were being apathetic, and this is what Kevin and his family believe, right? That the police were not showing urgency. They were being apathetic. It actually took them upwards of 18 minutes to get his brother to the hospital, and he did pass away. And so that instance really damaged Kevin, broke any semblance of sanity that he had in that moment. And a couple hours later, he did kill a policeman, one of the policemen that had been on scene at the moment. And he felt that they were culpable in his little brother's death. And so that situation immediately, but an entire life of trauma, abuse, violence, all led up to what happened that day.
It's so interesting that you make the statement that we have to start at childhood, because one of the things that stood out to me when I was sort of doing some research on this case is, we sort of draw this arbitrary line in the sand, right? That, when you're 18, you become an adult. You're supposed to be all actualized and aware, when really that flies in the face of what we know about human brain development, that the brain continues to develop somewhere up until around the age of 25 or 26. So even though, yes, we're dealing legally with somebody who's an adult on paper, what we know is that in the span of his development, he's still really in reality closer to a child. And while that certainly doesn't offer an excuse for what happened, I do think you're correct that a lot of times, particularly when we talk about criminal justice, we like to start in the middle of the story with the act itself, without any consideration for what has happened before or what type of systemic things lead people to those places of hopelessness where they feel like violence is the only choice they have. And so I'm very glad you said that. And one of the questions I have is, as you've been sort of doing this work, dealing with Kevin's particular situation, has it given you any insight into how much disregard our system shows towards young people who are sort of caught up, and how easy it is for us to decide that somebody at 19 has no value and they're not worthy to live anymore, for something that happened at 19 against the backdrop of a traumatic circumstance? Like, I know that Kevin's story is particularly powerful, but I'm sure in your line of work, it's not something that's unique. And talk about the ways that you've seen this system sort of consume our young people.
It is definitely not unique, Amber. Our system, I often say our system ignores and neglects young people, particularly Black children, right? The school system, the social service system, every apparatus that is supposedly there to help families and help children and protect them when it's needed, failed him, and they failed all of our children. This is definitely not the first case. We had a case last year where, I'm sorry, my fur person wants to be quiet, wants to be loud this morning. But so we had a case last year where it was similar. So our systems are not set up to actually help young people. Even people say, oh, well, we got to take the child and put them in foster care. Well, Kevin was put in foster care in group homes, and guess what? He was abused. those places don't exist today because there was so much abuse going on. They shut them down, and so it's just the fact that systems fail people. But the moment you do something that they call criminal, that they call going against, the power structure, the entire system is there to hold you accountable. The entire system, the prosecutor, the judges, the jails, the police, everybody's there to hold you accountable and say, you did a bad thing. But the years and years prior to that, you're basically ignored, thrown away, and not thought about. And so I often think about that particular situation where Kevin had a life of extreme trauma. One teacher, so we have a video, it's called Clemency video that his attorneys had created. And in it, one of his teachers who taught him, I believe, kindergarten, he said that she recalls Kevin coming to school smelling like urine and with bruises, and she knew that he was being abused. But she just maybe didn't think it was that bad or didn't think it was her place to do anything or whatever the situation. But of course, she regrets that now. But, right, it's too late. And so we see that these systems are not set up to actually help our young people. But as soon as they do something, quote unquote, criminal, the entire system is right there to hold them accountable. So I see it every single day, which is why my motto, how we say, protect Black women or, saying Black Lives Matter. I don't do that. I ride for the kids. I ride for the babies and the youth because ain't nobody doing that. I've known people that went to protest and, want to go outside and scream BLM all day and they come home and treat their kids like massive treated our ancestors. It doesn't work like that, so I'm always, my priority is always our young people because they are the ones who not only coming next, but they are the ones that got to deal with this generation after generation of trauma. And it got to be a point where we say, okay, we're going to stop traumatizing our young people. We're going to stop treating them like massive treated our ancestors, and we're going to do something different. Actually, a lot of our people are on that, but too many are not. Too many are still in those ways of our colonizers.
So, Michelle, when, with your focus on the children, can you just take us back a little bit to that day and what happened and connect us to where Kevin is in his journey in 2022?
Sure. Well, July the 5th of 2005, well, of course, right after the holiday, Kevin was at home. And so his grandmother and great grandmother lived next door to each other. So he was, and I can't remember which grandmother, I think it was the great grandmother's house. But when he was there, his little brother who was next door had a seizure. Now, we know that in the 80s, right, early 90s, crack ravaged our communities. There were so many people who were suffering and struggling under drug addictions. And of course, at that point, it wasn't a health crisis. It was a criminal thing. Today, there's a health crisis. I recount to people, especially white people all the time, when they say, oh, drugs are drugs. And I say, guess what? We didn't have a 5K crack race. There was no 5K where people were addicted to crack. You went to jail. There was no health, so, because people, of course, always want to both sides things. But anyway, Kevin's little brother had a heart condition because their mother was on drugs. And he was a sickly little boy. He actually had heart surgery 3 days after he was born. So Kevin was very close to him. And we know in our communities, when a sibling is several years older than the younger siblings, you almost take on a parent role to them, right? And Kevin was literally like Bam Bam. His brothers was named Bam Bam. Kevin was almost like a father to him. Their fathers weren't in the picture. Kevin's dad was in prison. And he was very close to him. And because he was a sick little boy, it was even more so he was protective of him. Sure. And that particular day, Bam Bam had a seizure. And the police again were there, and they were pushing their mom out the house and just being very policey. That's all I could, to call it, right? Just being very apathetic, just screaming at people, telling them to get away. They just did not really care that this family was going through this crisis and getting a little boy to the hospital 18 minutes later after they're having a medical emergency. I've seen cops throw kids in the back of their car and race them to the hospital. But that day, Bam Bam's life wasn't worth that extra effort. So he passed away. And because Kevin had served as, his almost parent figure, his nurturer, his protector, he lost all of the semblance of restraining himself that he had before. And he had suffered himself over the years. As a teenager, he tried to commit suicide because he blamed himself for all of the trauma that he had been through in life. And in that moment, he just, snapped, basically, is what happened. And several hours later, the police, the same cop that had been pushing his mom out the door and being ignorant to the family, came back in the neighborhood. And Kevin saw him and he shot him several times. I think he shot him, I believe, 5 or 6 times, if I'm not mistaken. But Kevin shot the policeman several times, screaming, "You killed my brother." And he passed away. Now, of course, today, Kevin understands that that wasn't right. He understands that, the medical condition actually killed his little brother. But in that moment, that understanding, eluded him. And so his attorney, I'm sorry, not his attorney, his prosecuting attorney, pushed forward the fact that Kevin was some type of thug, animal, what they do to black boys, right? You're a thug, you're an animal, you're a criminal, you're this and you're that. And Kevin was actually a good kid. He played on the football team. He was good in school. He had bad grades and he missed a lot of school because of his home life, but he was not a troubled kid at school. He was not a bully. He was not, harming people. But the prosecutor made it seem like Kevin was the worst person in the world, and subsequently, several years later, got a death sentence against him.
So at 19, was sentenced to death for this?
Well, by the time he was sentenced to death, he was probably 21. So about 2 years later. But the crime occurred when he was 19, yes.
And I think it also highlights another important issue about how we have our issues responded to in our community, because this was very clearly, by all accounts, a medical emergency. And so the thing that I've been wondering, why the police were there? Why you send the police for somebody who's having a medical emergency unrelated to any violent encounter? This was a longstanding health condition. And it's, this idea that even in our sickness, we're criminalized, we're treated like criminals, because this baby needed an ambulance. And I think that it is very difficult to watch your loved one have a medical event in front of you. That's a layer of trauma all on its own. But then to feel like you're being criminalized or punished while that happens, that is a traumatic event as well. And I think that is certainly a factor that the state should consider in determining whether this is a death penalty appropriate crime. And, I think a lot of times that stuff kind of gets lost in the sauce because they're so normalized to criminalizing us that I don't think that the level of trauma, even if the ambulance had been there, it still would have been traumatic. But then to watch somebody die in front of you and in their last moments, they're being treated like a criminal, that's hard. That's hard. And so I do feel like there's a part of this story that just reminds us that this is not a system that's always responsive to the things that we need. There's a tendency to criminalize us. There's a tendency to make assumptions about us in our moments of need. And that has real life lived experiences on people. Like, again, to the point you make, it doesn't make what Kevin did right. But if you continue to ignore trauma and you continue to have trauma that goes unaddressed, it is eventually going to manifest itself some way, somehow. And we don't talk about that nearly enough.
And even if we ignore all the things about what was happening to, like, the fact that there was a murder, right? Like, I guess you can't ignore that part, but the fact that, do we think that he would have gone out and shot a police officer without this experience having happened to him, right? Like you're saying, Amber, nobody takes into account that we don't think that Kevin would have been in the street just willy-nilly shooting police officers. So how do you have the system, the judge, the 12 jurors, I'm assuming there was a jury trial. How do you have all of this come together and everybody's like, yep, the death penalty, even though none of us would be thinking that this is something that he would have done anyway.
Well, as we have always been subject to things like racism, right? Kevin had an all-white jury. So whenever you want to condemn a black man, what you got to do, go get all white people. I will say a couple things just to clear something up. First, what Amber said. So the police were actually already there on the block because, okay, so I am in St. Louis, which is Ferguson. So I'm kind of ground zero. This is what we deal with. And I tell people, Meacham Park is the community where Kevin is from. Meacham Park was Ferguson before there was a Ferguson. It's a community of basically poor black people where a richer suburb of white people had their proverbial knee on their necks. And this is just how they existed. Every single day they had encounters with the police. The police patrolled their neighborhoods, saw a group of 2 or 3 black boys standing together, and that was a problem. So they had been, dealing with this. So the police had actually been on the block already when this happened. And as the little boy Bam Bam collapsed, the grandmother started, of course, screaming because, she needed help. And the police came running from, down the street. They were on the street at the moment. So that's how they were there quickly. And they did call an ambulance. And interestingly enough, when they called the paramedics, so this little boy was 12 years old, right? So they got there and they started telling the cops, look around the house and see if there's any drugs laying around that he could have taken. Mind you, this is not a 2-year-old who would open up the cabinets under the sink and ingest some kind of chemical cleaner. This little boy is 12 years old. Obviously, he's not just walking around the house putting things in his mouth that don't belong there, right? But this is what they did, and they were actually looking for illicit drugs, is what I believe.
Of course.
But so Kevin was looking through the window of the house next door, and he saw the police walking around the house. He said he could tell they were stepping over his little brother's body because the way that the house is made is not that big of a house. And they were walking around. It's like, okay, you're stepping over his body. You're here, but you're not immediately loading him up and taking him to the hospital. And again, later they said they were looking for if the little boy ingested something. This is not a toddler.
But you render aid first.
I was about to say, that's secondary to the rendering of medical assistance. And also, I'm a former prosecutor. And so some of this stuff just really chaps my butt that we have systems in place that will gladly try to exploit an emergency to seek a reason or a criminal element. Like that is not what the exigent circumstance exception to a warrant is for. Like if you have somebody who has a seizure and you think that person is seizing because of illicit drugs, you get them medical help and then you take your ass to a court with a warrant and you try to get a search warrant signed because you say you think you have probable cause. But to exploit that, to be walking around in people's house like that is not okay. That's not okay. That's not okay.
And that's the thing. And that's what Kevin saw. And because of the relationship the police had with that community, they, of course, had the worst idea. So, of course, the police say we were trying to help. We were doing what we could. And I'm not even going to debate their perspective of it. But the fact that you had a relationship with this community where they didn't trust you anyway meant that as soon as you came on the scene, they're going to look at you, side eye you, not trust you. So that was already a created situation. But then getting back to the trial and how all of this came about, Kevin actually had 2 trials, Erika. He had a first trial in 2006, and the verdict was mixed because there was a mixed jury, right? There were black and white people. And then they were able to get in a lot of his history, a lot of his abuse and trauma, his own suicidal attempts, and the situation with his brother. That came into court. But when our prosecutor got it was, I think, 8-4 split in the jury verdict, the prosecutor was not happy. This also is the same prosecutor who would not charge and take to trial the man who killed Mike Brown Jr. So these things are all interrelated in my community. But when he did not get the verdict that first time, he decided to do what he needed in order to get a death sentence against Kevin. And the first step was getting an all-white jury. That's always what's going to have to happen. In order to, to really demonize a black man, you're going to have to get all white people. You're going to have to exclude all of the history of Kevin's life. And that's what they did. And he, say any kind of prosecutorial, hoops and all of that he jumped through to get the verdict that he wanted. And so that's what happened in the second trial in 2007.
And so I also want to add a little layer of context here, just as a former prosecutor. So when you're picking a jury, you have a panel, a veneer panel, just like the people that get the bad luck that it's their turn to come down there that day. So you get forms that show like these people's background, basic information, all of that. And depending on how big the panel is, and usually for a death penalty case, you're going to have a large panel of people, because a lot of people are going to be automatically deselected just by virtue of the fact that they are opposed to the death penalty. But in addition to that, you get what is called peremptory challenges, which means that you can, for whatever reason, decide that you want to strike this person. I have struck people from juries because I saw them sleeping. I've struck people from juries because I seen them rolling their eyes when I was talking. I struck a woman once because she was playing crossword puzzle during the jury panel. So it's just, these are you can strike. And usually you don't have to explain why you strike people unless the prosecutor or the defense does what's called a Batson challenge, which they basically accuse you of striking somebody for an unlawful reason. But let me tell y'all what the gag is. 100% lawyers strike people for unlawful reasons every single day. But it is considered in the legal profession very discourteous to accuse another lawyer of a Batson violation. So it makes you look very bad. Honestly, like it is, I remember being told like it is a huge deal to Batson challenge somebody. You don't ever want to accuse another lawyer. So even just built into our profession is sort of this discouragement of lawyers from using this tool when what is so obviously happening a lot of times is happening and everybody knows it. It is considered a huge professional risk in a lot of cases, honestly, to Batson challenge a lawyer. There are judges who I Batson challenged a lawyer once, and a judge lit my ass up for Batson challenging him. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, everybody he struck was black. And I'm not accusing him. I'm just asking him to do what the court says he has to do and put forward his race neutral reason. And the judge was very annoyed with me for that. And so I will just say, like, I know a lot of people hear this, like, oh, it was an all-white jury, but you don't know why. I'm telling you, as somebody who works in this system, that it happens all the time. And there are built-in mechanisms to make it very difficult to raise that issue, because as lawyers, it's considered like not playing nice in the sandbox to accuse somebody of a Batson violation, even when you know that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, interesting, Amber. So Bob McCullough is actually known, he has a nickname, King of the Batson. Our prosecutor, that's what he does. And we recently had a report released by a professor out of North Carolina. And what this professor does is he looks at racial issues within death penalty cases. That's all he does. And he said that in our community, under this prosecutor, Black people are 3.5 more times likely to get a death sentence, and for this prosecutor to actually push that particular issue, as far as, like, we call it a death ticket. So death ticket, it means that the prosecutor announces they're going to seek death penalty, and it's 3.5 times more likely that a Black person will receive that. So McCullough was definitely known as the King of the Batson. And one more thing, we're talking about racism and death penalty or criminal justice issues overall. It's not always about the defendant's race. It's about the victim. You are very much more likely to get a death sentence or to get extreme punishment if you kill a white person.
Absolutely.
Not white people killing Black people or white people killing each other. But if you kill a white person as a Black person, you're going to get that hammer brought down upon your head exponentially more likely.
And a police officer forget about it.
Yeah.
Correct.
But you know, a white kid killed a cop here in 2016, and our prosecutor got on TV and said, "Oh, that doesn't rise up to a death penalty case." Right? So you can be a white kid and kill a cop, and you know, you get some compassion and that kind of thing, but not being a Black kid. So yeah.
Wow.
And it's interesting that you talk about like the language, like they'll call them children or they'll call the defendants kids. But we have a tendency to adultify Black children. Oh, they're tough. Like it broke my heart when you said that that baby was going to school smelling like urine with bruises on him. And a teacher was like, oh, well, you know, I didn't really think enough of it to say something. Like this idea that we have in our heads that Black children are so tough and they should be able to just handle everything. Like imagine how different Kevin's life would be if that person had said something when he was 5. Or imagine perhaps what could have happened if he would have gotten the intervention he needed then. Like we have a tendency to see white children who make mistakes as children and to penalize them according to their childlike status. And it is very difficult for us to extend that same type of, I don't even want to call it a privilege or a courtesy, but extend that same type of common sense rationale to Black young offenders who are offending against the backdrop of trauma or who are offending against the backdrop of other extenuating circumstances. It doesn't mean they don't deserve a penal punishment, but it's certainly a consideration in whether you are deciding to try to take their life or throw the book at them, you know.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess in a minute we can talk about, do they deserve a penal punishment? But Michelle, related to Kevin, so now as he sits on the Missouri State death row, where is his case?
So currently, his legal case is proceeding. His attorneys, he has a great legal team, and they are in court, trying to push the racism claim against the prosecutor. And they are doing all they can in the court, trying to get him a stay of execution and get more investigation done. So they are handling that right now. We haven't gotten any decisions or anything along that line, but it's currently in the Missouri State Supreme Court pocket. And so that is the process. And eventually it will go over to the U.S. Supreme Court. But as we know, we don't expect a lot of these people, right? I mean, they've been doing the most for
the
months
least.
now. Doing the most and the least at the same time. So yeah, it is, like I said, it is going through the court system. His attorneys are doing all they can to challenge what's going on, and we support them very much. But out here, in what my job is to educate and amplify the public, because we don't know what's going on. I talk to people often, and I tell them that, there is a such thing as death penalty, and the state kills, this federal government kills. 2 years ago, Trump and Boyd killed 13 people before they left office. And so these things happen. And a lot of times people look at me like I've lost my mind when I talk about the state kills, because the state is never held responsible for killing anybody. But our state definitely kills poor and marginalized people, and not just Black people. It kills poor and marginalized white people as well. And so it is definitely my job to educate our community. And a lot of people will say, hey, well, they did something bad and they deserve, their punishment. But there's a difference in systemic punishment and what you feel like you should do. I can't tell someone how to feel about when their family or their loved ones victimized. You feel the way you feel. But when we're talking about systemic punishment in our criminal punishment system, our government has no right to kill anybody. It's a poster behind me. You can't really see it. But Brian Stevenson said the issue is not that someone deserves to die, it's that if we deserve to kill. And this country does not deserve to kill anybody. There is blood of indigenous folks, Black people, African people, all throughout the ground of this land over generations and generations, and nobody was held accountable. So we just don't believe that this country has the moral authority to kill anybody, period. Point blank, I don't care who it is, including Dylan Roof. And people ask me all the time, oh, what about George Floyd's murder? What about Dylan Roof? This country does not have the right to kill anybody. Now, if Dylan Roof's victims' families decide they want to do so, hey, everybody got the right to do what they need to do, or how to feel how they want to feel. You might feel like somebody needs to be punished severely. You have the right to feel that way, but our system does not have the right to kill, because we have no moral authority or no position to say who needs to die. Because if that's what we're doing, the founders of this country could have been executed, right? Just keep
Uh-oh.
moving. So yeah, so I just want to make that clear that this punishment system is not equal, is not just, is biased, and it's very racist and prejudiced and classist as well. Rich people ain't on death row.
At all.
Ain't no person. If you can afford a robust private attorney, no matter what you did, you're not on death row in this country.
100%.
So, Michelle, in your bio, you talk about being an abolitionist. Yeah. And I know that terminology in this context can be new, can be scary for a lot of people. So talk to us about what it means to you to be an abolitionist.
So abolition is something that people definitely confuse. Like, for instance, when people say defund the police, and it's like, oh, what do you want to just get rid of the police? That's not what that means. So I definitely have this conversation with people often about what abolition means. Abolition is not where I say tomorrow open up every prison door and we're just going to have everybody run amok. That's not what abolition is. Abolition is replacing what is harming us today with something better. So it's not just a void, it's actually filling that void with something better. And we'll look at community safety, public safety. And I tell people all the time, don't call the police. Don't pick up your phone and call 911. That is not helpful for anybody, black, white either, but it's not helpful for us. But when you create a community of people who support each other, who hold each other down, when there's something going on, you have someone to call. That is what abolition means, and that is what means replacing the system that is there with something that is community focused. And I get that a lot of people don't have that, but that's what we need to create. In my own community, there are several organizations that are creating that. There are many people in our community don't call. Now, first of all, when you call 911, don't nobody come. I don't know where y'all live, but in St. Louis, don't nobody even show up.
Wow.
Just keeping it real. Wow. Everybody talks about that. Yeah, they don't even show up 3 hours later, maybe. Wow. So you have to really have a community around you to where you all are holding each other accountable, where you all supporting each other. And our young people talk a lot about, the kids are robbing and kids are doing this and kids are doing that. Do they have anything productive to do? Have you created a system where the kids are educated, where they're supported, where they are able to have fun in, healthier ways? No, right? People just want kids to just be out there doing whatever, but as soon as they do something bad, it's time to hold them accountable. Let's make our children, let's make spaces for our children to be children, to have fun, to, if they want to, young people want to get a job or training or education. We have to create that. Crime is about opportunity. And it is about, the lack of something. I have never known in my life anyone who sold drugs they wanted to just be Al Capone or Frank Lucas, right? And those people existed. But everybody that I know sold drugs to help their mama pay the bills, to get school clothes, right? When they were 13, 14, 15, and they're poor, they started selling crack because it was a way to put shoes on their feet, because when they went to school, they didn't have any. And so we need to make sure that we actually create a system in a society where our communities are better and we won't need these criminal punishment systems, because that's not something that exists. So it's about feeling something where there's something bad right now, feeling that with something good and something community focused and positive. That's actually what abolition means.
And Michelle, just personally, as you talked about that and you talked earlier about the children, I'm just sitting here thinking about my own life, right? So I have a new teenager, and whether she was a teenager or not, kids get into things, right? They make mistakes. We all do. And I'm just thinking about, even within the framework of me being a parent, how all the tools that I have been taught and I'm reaching for are punitive tools, right? Like, what can I do to harm her? And I don't literally mean harm her, but y'all know what I'm saying. Like, what can I do to punish her? And more recently, I have been trying to think through, why does everything have to be about punishment? And how do we teach people to be able to make mistakes when they are young, so that when they are older, that process can look different. And so I appreciate you for bringing that all together. Not that you meant to do that, but just as a parent here in this moment, it's making me connect some dots in terms of how I can approach things. And then, of course, you build that throughout your community.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely think, especially being a Black girl, right?
Yeah.
This world is not, you know what I mean, compassionate towards Black girls. No, period, wherever you go, it doesn't matter where it's at. And so you definitely have to instill in them, first, you know, self-esteem and self-confidence is definitely something that gets a lot of our girls in trouble because they're trying to find, you know, those good feelings in people that are harmful. And so I definitely think that making sure your girls know that they're loved, they're supported. I tell people often, let's not tell our little girls they're beautiful all the time, which is true. They are beautiful. Let's tell them they're strong, they're amazing, they're intelligent, they can do what they need to do. They can, you know what I'm saying, they can conquer the world because of their innate intelligence and those abilities. But when you instill that in younger girls, we all gonna make mistakes. I mean, you know, we all, you know, that's one thing I tell women today who 40 and 50 and how everybody's like, oh, Megan this and Cardi B that. I tell them all the time, what was y'all doing in 94?
Okay. Look.
Everybody I know, if you look at it, our age between 93 and 97 had kids. You know why? Because we was doing things, okay? Right? And so it's like we have to understand kids are going to do things. Just have to help them, you know, do it in healthy ways. And when they do make mistakes, you know, have those conversations with them, support them, you know, just be a person who is not going to punish them, but actually support them in their healing and, you know what I'm saying, and getting back where they need to be. But we're all going to do things, but it's always about how we go about supporting and helping each other. And I think that we need to really understand that. But I definitely, you know, and that's why when people talk about, you know, I'm down to 50 years old, but I don't care about Megan shaking her butt. I don't care. She's 25. Let her shake it, because when you were 25, you were shaking it too. And so and you're okay, right? I mean, women act like, you know, because she's shaking her butt at 25, you're okay at 50, and you did it 25 years ago. And so I definitely think that you really need to, you know, have that open dialogue with these young people. They ain't crazy. They see people fake. They see when adults approach them in some kind of fake way. Every kid I know, you know, I come to them just like I am. You know what I'm saying? And it's like they respect that instead of trying to, you know, baby them or make them feel like, you know, they're wrong. Just really supporting them. And I definitely applaud you what you're doing with your daughter, but definitely keep that up and just let her know you're here. You know, she may make mistakes, but it will be okay. And kids are not innately bad. He's like, oh, you need to train them. You need to do this. Kids are not born bad. That's not a thing, right? They're born human and they need to learn. And so we need to make those environments for them to be able to learn.
Yeah. And I think y'all are both making the point that also undergirds abolition, which is that punishing people don't work. It don't work. When you just decide,
because Amber mama didn't want her to be fast, and she's still listening to Megan on the way to church.
And I went to all girls school. Wasn't a boy in my school, and I guarantee I spent more time with boys than anybody who went to, a school that had both sexes. Okay, but it doesn't work. And we are talking about that across multiple places where we see it. It doesn't work when we do it with our kids. It doesn't work when you take somebody and put them in a cage like an animal and say, this is how many years I'm going to treat you like an animal to punish you. Actually, you're punishing us, because this person, when they come back into society, you're expecting them to have a different mindset. You're expecting them to somehow be rehabilitated when all they've been is confined. And I think that is one of, to me, the most important things that the abolition movement has brought to light, is that this idea that we can punish people into behaving properly. We know it doesn't work with our teenagers. It doesn't work with people who make mistakes either. If you're not giving somebody the tools that they need to come back into society and be a productive member, and also addressing the systems that contributed to the bad choices they made, all you're doing is putting them further behind the ball than they were when they went in. And so I think talking about it in the context of children is a way to make abolition seem less radical, because people love to take a term and run with it. They want to set all the criminals free, to terrorize us, not be accountable for what they're doing.
The criminals in charge, they already free.
Right, but everybody knows that this doesn't work. We talk about it with our kids, we talk about it on jobs. And then for us to think that, oh, well, it's going to work when it comes to how we keep ourselves safe from people who make decisions that imperil us, it is just foolish to think that it's somehow going to be different in that context.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about punishment and rehabilitation, that's not what punishment don't rehabilitate anybody. Community does. Even Kevin specifically, when he went to prison, he got around other men who had a positive outlook, who were mentors, who were helping the other incarcerated folks. And so that's why he is a great person he is today, because he got under those people that would help him. Despite the environment that he was in, he became a better person on purpose, because he knew that in order to do that, I had to be among, these quote unquote upstanding, better men. And so punishment didn't do it. These 17 years he's been in prison, they didn't fix anything. He fixed himself with the help of those around him. So we need to understand community is the fix. It's not punishment. And prisons are trauma filled. Several weeks ago, and I'm trying to investigate this case right now, there was a 21-year-old young man that was severely raped in one of the prisons in our state. I mean, brutally raped, right? And so I think he has a 3 to 5 year sentence for some type of robbery or something. Being in prison is not helping him. He is traumatized. He's in a hospital. He has so much healing that he has to do. Thankfully, he's not, dead. But it's like sending him to prison and putting him in this environment did not do anything to help him. Now he has to heal and, become better from that trauma. And who knows? So we might have created a whole new type of criminal-minded person by putting him in this position. And so, punishment doesn't help. Community helps. And that's what I really want to get across to people. It's about community, getting around, great people, getting in a space. I don't know where you guys live, but in our city, we have organizations that are trying to create that holistic area, and you have to really connect with those people and do that work.
Yeah. And prison is so disruptive to community. Just to highlight that point, like the point you make about Kevin, it's unfortunate that that's the exception and not the rule. But for a lot of people, prison exacerbates their lack of community. A lot of people are placed in facilities where they're hundreds of miles away. It's cost prohibitive for their family to visit, even like collect calls. Like my husband has a brother who is incarcerated, and it is a privilege that we can afford it. But like them phone calls is expensive, and you got to keep a debit card with money on the books for people to be able to make those phone calls. And there are a lot of people whose families cannot afford that. And so you have people who are, separated from their communities.
And just recently, I'm hearing more stories about different prison systems who are trying to limit the amount of packages that people can receive. So it's all about rehabilitation, but we want to, like you said, to the point of disruption, we want to cut you off. We want to take away any semblance of humanity. So the fact that you used to be able to get a fresh avocado from your family, that will never happen again. And so in every aspect, right, from the who you talk to the food you eat. And the difficult thing on this side, Michelle, is honestly, I don't know how to build the types of communities that we need in order to be able to survive this. Like, where do you start? How does one do it? Not one, but how do we do it?
It definitely takes, a purpose, a group of people, a group of organizers, a group of community members getting together and deciding this is what we're going to create, this is what we're going to do. In my community, we have created, and again, this is ground zero. So out of Ferguson came a lot of amazing programs and organizations that, 8-9 years later, they're still doing that particular work. So it really is about making those connections to people and community members. And I, encourage you and other people to find in your community if there are people who are trying to do that work that may be small, maybe a few people, but connect with those people that are really trying to make community, that are trying to connect, that are trying to make sure all of the children are safe and protected and educated and supported, and get with them. We have what's called a Power Builders meeting here every other week. It is a meeting of community members talking about, violence in our communities, how we support each other, what we can do to create that better apparatus of having someone else to go to besides the police. So I definitely encourage everyone to connect with those on the ground doing it. And if there is no one, start it yourself. We look at social media and we look at these famous influencers and entertainers or rappers to guide us. We have that in ourselves to do it for ourselves. And so it's not something that's probably popular or getting a lot of attention. So look for it. Look for it in your community. Try to find those people. And again, if they're not there, start creating, right? Your neighbors, your friends that you go to church with, or your kids, the parents of the kids on your kids' soccer team, or whatever the situation is, and start creating that for yourself.
Amber, I think Michelle might have just read us. I'm not sure. I don't know. Did you just get read, or was it just me?
I felt a little conviction in my sha-na-na too.
Okay. She did it in such a polite way.
I can definitely connect you all and other people with those folks in my community. That's not my work. I'm not heading it up, but I'm definitely a part of it, and I support what they're doing, and I try to, be involved. We just had a school shooting here several days ago in St. Louis. So people are gathering around that. There is a lot going on in our community, and we had a flood here a couple months ago. We had bad rain and it was flooding, and people got together to, help community members then. So it's all about having that apparatus to go to. And I definitely encourage people, but I definitely have connections and folks here that are doing that work. And I know nationally there are people doing it other places as well, but and so if I had a problem right now, that's who I'll call. I wouldn't pick up the phone. I'd ask somebody one day. I can't imagine a situation where I would pick up my phone and call 911. I just literally don't even know a situation where that would even happen, other than like a natural disaster, I guess. You know what I'm saying? Like some type of natural disaster. But like on a daily basis, we don't rely on the systems that have been here to oppress us. We rely on ourselves. And so, I have people that I can call. I have people that will show up if there is anything going on. And so we have to make sure that we have that in place.
Wow. Well, Michelle, finally tell the people where they can find your work, where they can donate, where they can learn more about Kevin's case.
Sure. Thank you so much. And Erika and Amber, thank you all for having me on. So in my name on here is our social handle, and we call it Mad P Mo. So Mad P Mo is our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. madpmo.org is our website. And so you can go and learn all of that information about Kevin. The clemency video is 35 minutes long. I really encourage people to watch that because you can really get an understanding of what Kevin dealt with in his entire life. I have a bit.ly link is bit.ly/toolkit for KJ. So toolkit for KJ, all caps. And I put all the information about his campaign inside, and people can share. I don't think we're not on this TikTok because I don't, the young people thing, but we post on all socials. We ask people to share our information. So please go to our website, our social, and learn, and then take that back to your own communities.
And as we sometimes are able to do, Amber and I will definitely give some money to your cause. So we will go, and on behalf of Brokish, we will send in a donation. So we'll let you know when that happens, and we'll make sure you get receipts and all that. So we're not out here lying, because I don't know, calling us Shauna King out here saying
it's not. Can't nobody tackle Mex like tackle Mex. Okay.
Okay.
I knew I liked you.
So thank you so much. We know you gotta go, Michelle. So we will let you go, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle. Bye-bye. That lady said talcum mix and bless my whole soul. God bless Michelle. God bless Mad Pimo. God bless them.
Right. Right. But we can't have nobody out here thinking that we keeping the money, Amber. When we
No,
say we're
no,
gonna give money,
no,
can't none of y'all say we didn't give.
no, no. Amen.
So, but yeah, that's a lot for me to think about in my own personal life. And like I said, just like an issue that I'm really like literally dealing with today. But fascinating how life does that.
And I think it all just causes us to unpack the ways we've been propagandized to believe that we need police systems, policing, incarceration as a means of safety.
Yep.
Because I know, at least for me, when I try to unpack what a world would look like where we center liberation and not oppression, it is very hard for me to undo the learning I've done around this notion that policing and confinement makes you safe. It is a very effective message, even for somebody like me who intellectually knows, who's seen the
Right.
data that the shit is not true.
Yep.
It is still a very hard emotional break to make, and to just say it with your chest that carceral systems don't work. We need something else. Like that. That's just a very hard thing to imagine because the propaganda we have around that issue is so strong.
It is. And she's so right, though, that this stuff starts at home. And to your point of like the propaganda in the home, like how now there's so much surveillance around our kids and what they're doing and our own surveillance, right? We put ourselves under cameras and under watch because we think that that's safety, and that's surveillance is not safety. And surveillance is not security. And I don't even know that we know what a lot of these words mean anymore, but
Yeah.
we just keep doing it. And so, woof, I feel like I literally feel like I'm about to get out here and fall on the floor and try to like rethink my whole life. Like, what am I doing?
Facts. And the road we're sending our kids down, because imagine if we're normalized to it, how kids who know we tracking their phones and tracking their cars, and we can pull up the bank, like they're so used to being literally policed that even more so for them than for us, it feels normal. It feels normal. It's almost like we're preparing them to be submissive to this system by the things that we are doing, because I'll call my son in a minute and be like, nigga, I know you lying. I know you're not where you said you are because I'm looking at the tracker on this car. And it's like, that ain't, when you playing a long game, is that really helpful? I'm sorry, Bubba, for doing you like that.
Oof. So, this is not where I thought this conversation was going to go, Amber, but whoa.
Yes. And abolition, I think it's a conversation we have to have. And I think it's one of the things that we have to get uncomfortable with, because, the people in the media who are railing against it try to make it something that it's not. But I think it's actually very layered and very nuanced and very interrelated to a lot of things. And so this is it's a necessary conversation. It's a necessary thing, because otherwise the people in the streets will just have you believing that this ain't about nothing but letting bad people do bad things without consequences. And ain't nobody said that.
At all.
Ain't nobody said that.
So Amber, today I almost feel like homework is punitive.
Yes, the homework is actually, y'all, literally find 35 minutes in your time and watch the clemency video, and not even watch it because you feel a certain way, the same way we feel about Kevin's issues or the same way Michelle feels. But I do think it's important for us to understand that Kevin can be any of us, because we're all like one traumatic decision away from being caught up in the system. You know what I'm saying? And so these processes that are in place that are impacting people, clemency, trying to get new trials, jury verdicts, and biases, like it's just not only an opportunity to learn about this particular case, but to learn about these issues so you can be informed about them and how they directly affect you. And also, y'all, this work that people like Michelle are doing, this work is not work that pays well. It is not work that is generously funded. And it takes people like us, our $5, our $10, our $20, to make it possible for people like her to go out and bring voice to these issues. You can have whatever opinion you have, but we certainly need to know that these things are happening. So if you feel so inclined, the other piece of the homework is, clean your purse out.
All right, good people. Thanks for listening to Brokish. For more episodes, visit us at brokish.com or subscribe, and Brokish will get direct deposited into your favorite podcast app on the 1st and 15th. Share Brokish with your friends and join the conversation on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Music for Brokish is Come Get Some by Blank and Kit. Until next time, goodbye and good luck.
We'll make sure that y'all have access to all that information to be able to know where to find her in addition to what she already shared. So y'all, it's easy to watch and be taken in by all of the news and images from the media. And it's so clear that the propaganda machine is aimed at making us afraid, especially of people in our own community. So let's consider the ways that we might help to make our communities, our own homes, safer by thinking about justice through different lenses. We have to know that if the people who hate us are lobbying for more police and more prisons and more surveillance, that there is no way that can be beneficial to us. The abolition movement was not a movement of the past, but an extremely present, critical call for all of us right now. We know lots of folks talk about wanting to be our ancestors' wildest dreams, but our ancestors wanted to be free. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Brokish.
All right, good people. Thanks for listening to Brokish. For more episodes, visit us at brokish.com or subscribe, and Brokish will get direct deposited into your favorite podcast app on the 1st and 15th. Share Brokish with your friends and join the conversation on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Music for Brokish is Come Get Some by Blank and Kit. Until next time, goodbye and good luck.
They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You play any and every position. Coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh my goodness, I see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.